It was always with her.
Well, she met her in summer stock. And Miss Hardy lived on the 17th floor of our building, which was the so-called penthouse. It wasn't, it was a wonderful building. They tore it down after my husband died and I left and came back home. They tore it down and made United Nations Plaza out of it.
Oh, wow.
I could never go back there because to me but I used to see Miss Hepburn sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, that's something. Well, she has a place in Connecticut, I think, and so
Okay, we are recording.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do we begin?
Yes.
I will be interviewing Maudwyne Metcalf today, a charter member of West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Janet Tyler. The date is October the 28th, 1995, and we are talking in Maudwyne's home in Lakewood. Now, what they always like to know, Maudwyne, is when were you first aware of or associated with Unitarianism? I believe you said your father was a Unitarian.
Well, to tell you the truth, I was very young. I was reading Emerson and talking with my father on deep, profound things because we had great rapport. And of course, historically, I knew about Unitarianism, how it swept through New England, congregational church after congregational church becoming Unitarian. And of course, many of my maternal grandmother's folks were either Universalists or Unitarians in New England. So I never knew a time when I didn't know about it. Also, I had a very hot date one night with a Unitarian minister.
Well, you said to me when we talked on the phone that you were a questioner. You were always a questioner.
Well, I think all people are. Well, no, I realize what you mean, but I think that the why and for of things is something that is innately a part of us. That we want to know, we don't want to be told, we want to investigate.
Well, in your youth, you did not attend Unitarian Church, did you?
No.
Never, you don't have to name the churches, but what was if you went to other churches, which I think you said you did, what was your reaction to them?
Well, it was rather ambivalent. My father, folks, when they came from Scotland, there is my grandfather, James Baxter Monroe, were Covenanters, and they became Covenanter. Sectarianism became absorbed by the Presbyterian Church. And my mother's folks, when they came to Xenia in 1865, Xenia, Ohio, they liked the Methodist minister. And so they joined the Methodist Episcopal Church. So there was a great discussion about sectarianism in our family. Something my mother said should have been settled before they got married. But you don't know how strong sectarianism was. Remember, I'm an Edwardian child. And I can only compare between the Protestant and Roman Catholic. The United Presbyterian Church was so strong in Xenia. They were all Scots by heritage. And I think they looked on our church as a little frivolous. I mean, but we had great influence coming from Antioch, Ohio, because Antioch was quite Unitarian at that time. I mean, there were many Unitarians among the professors, and there was a very flourishing Unitarian church in Dayton.
That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. And, well, Antioch was at the forefront of all change. Sadly, it has receded.
Well, you did say that when you went to Chicago, you then got into a unity.
That's right, because we lived in the area where the University of Chicago is, and there was a vast, gorgeous Unitarian church there. And of course, at that time, 1933, it was the bastion of prosperity. The only people who had any money were Unitarian ministers. But I spent one whole day there, and I remember vividly, but then, of course, there were services.
Well, when did you come to Cleveland then?
Then we came into Cleveland in the 30s, about 1936, 37, and there was this church downtown, but we were talking to our friend, Miss Cora Lair, who lived in Lakewood and who was a member of the 82nd Church. And you know how people talk about things for a long while? It's long, and then finally you have a baby, and then you have to go clear to 82nd and Euclid. And Miss Lair really is in many ways responsible for our church, and I'm afraid that the younger people don't know about it. And I hate to be long at the bar, but Miss Cora Lair was a very unusual woman. She was a very outstanding teacher. She had you've heard of the major work program in the Cleveland School?
Yes.
All right. She taught the first class. She I can't go in detail, but when they came, David Cole requested that what are we going to name the new, which is now the charter lounge, and the new lounge. So I wrote a letter to the board, and among other things, I told about Miss Lair and how she had persuaded, really, Dr. Everett Moore Baker to come out here and give this series of lectures at the community place, because she said there's a great need for Unitarianism on the West Side. And she was a very active member of the City Club of the First Unitarian Church, the Rose Society. She had a house in Lakewood. She came from very distinguished German immigrants, the ones who came in the Revolution of 1848. And I said, at West Shore, our heroes have customarily run to some of large accomplishments. But I feel that the new lounge gives us an opportunity to honor a member of our church whose contribution was not only to our size, but to our spirit, not only to our beliefs, but to our insight, not only to our self-esteem, but to our self-comprehension. I sincerely hope the Board of Trustees will give careful and serious consideration to my heartfelt recommendation that the new room be dedicated to the memory of this quiet, self-effacing, but tremendously important foundation block of our congregation, Cora A. Lair. And her dates are 1886, 1969. And I have the letter from the president of the board thanking me for the letter. They almost did it. And then what happens in churches? What happens in governments? Politics. And so it was named the Charter Room.
Charter room, yeah.
But, we had Shuttee Hall, we had Baker Hall, and this woman wrote me a very fine letter that I read to a group that was in the old college, Lakewood College Club. And they all got so interested, and they got up there and heard Dr. Everett Moore Baker, and they became the pillars of the church. And that included Dorothy Tier, and Marguerite Ashbrook, and Betty Sprague, and Laura Horsfall. They all were either not going to church or were very, very dissatisfied with the churches where they were. So, I feel a little responsible. I don't feel like salvation now. Well,
Can you tell us something about the early participation of Everett Moore Baker and Wayne Chattee in those community center days?
Mm-hmm.
What were your impressions
Oh,
of how this was going to go?
I thought that Dr. Everett Moore Baker was one of the most charming, most interesting, and he was intellectual but with a sense of humor. And he left 82nd to become the dean at MIT, and he had wonderful, wonderful aura about him. He could easily converse with anyone, and also he was very handsome. He had silver hair, although he was quite young, and his wife was very gracious and lovely. And of course, it's a terrible thing that that whole plane, went down that he was on that peace mission, going from Egypt to Europe. I think they were going to London. Everyone was killed on the plane. And it probably was intentional. I don't know. It is a great mystery. But Dr. Everett Moore Baker just was the answer to everyone's prayer. If you can say that as a Unitarian. But here it was after World War II. People had seen terrible things that were in the war. Men and a lot of women. And they were looking for a fulcrum, a balance, something that gave meaning to their lives beyond, we don't live on bread alone. And this seemed to fill the category.
Do you remember indulging in any activities in between March of 1946 and September, when the first service was to be held, West Shore Unitarian? Do you remember fundraising or activity, open houses or anything like that?
Well, for instance, they were all at our house and our old house and other houses, and people were pretty much the same age at that time, mm-hmm. and had starting families, and the war had given great prosperity to the country also. And after you've lived through the Depression, this was really something. People had forgotten how to give, really. But I was very, very pleased with the contribution that all the friends that I mentioned gave to our church. And because at that time, the women of our generation did not work. Now you have a different story altogether.
Yes, you certainly do.
Yes,
Did your children take part in religious education?
Oh, yes, they loved it.
That's great. And what did they think of the curriculum?
My oldest daughter, who was, quite interested in the other sex, and they and her, one morning I didn't wake her in time to go, and she was furious, just furious. So they liked the teaching, The only thing, one daughter, Mayo, who later was on the board of trustees, Mayo Metcalf Bullock, stopped going when Dr. Sampson came because she wanted to hear the series of lectures that he was giving one year. And she liked it so much, she went the next year and left the senior class. But I would say it was, from every aspect, socially, spiritually, intellectually, it was a very happy type of situation in our church. And that's why, as I say, when I go in the church now, I wonder where, this is the church, here's the steeple, open the door, the people have gone.
There's a lot of people though in the church.
They're
now.
all
Very
young,
active.
vibrant.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's the way it should be, of course.
Well, you said that your husband was very active.
Oh,
but
very.
What particular committees
Oh,
did he
he-
find,
Well,
meaningful
the
activity?
first year we were in the Masonic Temple, poor dear Henry and the mayor boys. At 7 o'clock, people were not working then on Saturday. All during the war, they'd work 6 days a week. And it was one morning to sort of let down. Well, they had a dance every night at the Masonic Temple. And they must have smoked the whole Philip Morris factory through. But they had to set up the chairs, clean the hall, empty all those dozens of ashtrays, get rid of bottles. And that he did for 2 years, which I think is a labor of love. And Martin helped him. He was very good. And Don was just coming along, but he finally got into the swing. But then Henry was on the board, and then he was president of the board later on, twice. Mm-hmm. But let me tell you, these weren't things that were just tossed off to get home to see television. Those people were, working till midnight often. The fine points of all the church procedures, and particularly the financial end. And we were very fortunate to have some fine and generous givers. One, Dorothy's father, Mr. Carl W. Schaefer, and of course, the organ was given to us. Now, what was I know them so well. And their daughter is a mover in our church. But in the East, I noticed my relatives went to a church that I would say the members of the church were in the higher income brackets. And that's true pretty much of the city churches in New England. If you look in who's who, now we are only 250,000 in this country, but if you look in who's who, tremendously, the Unitarians seem to outnumber anyone affiliated with other sectarian denominations. Now that dear man, he was, at 22, he was kicked out of the Kirk for dancing. A Monroe. My name is Monroe. But, so I guess it was a very happy time, and I was very sorry to leave all the work to other people. But we certainly had splendid people and working very hard.
They would like you to assess the effectiveness of, you've already spoken highly of Everett Moore Baker, Wayne Schutte, the first
Wayne
minister
was a
of
delightful,
West Shore.
yes, a delightful young man. And you know how serendipitous life is. He had happened to go to school with one of my sons-in-law. I mean, the sons-in-law mother. So Wayne he had an excellent voice. You could sit in the back of our church when Wayne Schutte, when Everett Moore Baker, who never came to the church but who did in his church, and when Peter Sampson spoke, and hear every single word. They had learned how to project, which is very important, which we have not had always.
Don't always have it, no.
No.
Peter Sampson.
Peter Sampson, of course, was a wonderful friend of our family. And I thought that he did a great deal for the church. For instance, in the years he was here, the 10 years, you could hardly get a seat in the church on Sunday. Our church school grew so fast, and there were so many, that we had to institute a law that you had to have a parent who belonged to the church before you could come to it. People were just, they heard the Unitarian church school was wonderful, so boom, boom, out the door on Sunday morning to be, or they'd bring them by cars. It was very complimentary, but when they got to 750, it had, outgrown its bounds, and we didn't have room for it. And I think people were very, very marvelous about giving their time and talents, the teachers, the people that served on the boards and still do. I don't know. I suppose it's just as in other churches, it's just the same, but this seemed to be a further degree of giving and caring, because they were carrying out something they felt that had enriched their lives. And the missionary spirit, when it's within bounds, is a wonderful thing.
And what about Jim Curtis?
What?
Jim Curtis.
Jim Curtis married one of my daughters right in front of that fireplace. And he, as far as I was concerned, I didn't know about his alcoholism, fortunately. He was here for a very brief time. The church was almost divided. And I say this, and you don't have to put this in, I would say the rats left the sinking ship, and they weren't missed, ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And David Cole.
David Cole was, I've never heard a better sermon than when he first came, but we had trouble with David. He is a New Englander. He speaks with a New England accent. He drops his voice at the end of a sentence. The Wally Tier and Madison Geddes, they went over this for years. They practically redid the church for his voice. Now, he has a marvelous voice, but you cannot do that if you're a public speaker. In fact, I note at the one of the great things, I have a nephew who's an actor. He was had the lead in The Doll's House here recently, and he was talking about the Ohio festival, about the festival company that's at the Ohio Theater, how that they have always brought people, projection people, who are specialized in showing you how to throw your voice if you're an actor, an actress. And he thought it was just marvelous. And he had, I hear our present minister, I think he's got an excellent voice. I do not hear our assistant minister as well. I have to listen very carefully.
Well, speaking of the present minister, would you like to comment on Michael McGee?
What?
Would you like to comment on Michael McGee?
I just said our present minister.
Well,
Yes.
further than that.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, I think his great, the thing about Michael that I like is his ability to not to offend any group in the church and to sort of bring them together. Now, that's a great asset in the church. I don't think Michael is the greatest intellect that ever came to our church. But that isn't, that's just part of the quotient. There are other factors. And his ability to regard the church as a group and have all groups work together without all these frictions that naturally you encounter, I think is a great plus for him.
Well, that's nice to hear you say that.
Yes, yes.
Now, when the permanent building was completed there at Hilliard and Northview, what were your impressions of the building?
Well, I thought we had done a great deal with the amount of money. Someone suggested to me it looked like a supermarket. I said, well, that's what we are, a supermarket for souls. Only you can't buy your way into this supermarket. Architecturally, I thought we had to have something functional and something which we could afford.
And how much of the work was done by volunteers?
Very little. I suppose the person who gave untold hours was Wallace Tier. And of course it's his church. And an architect always regards his work as something rather special. And I think he's well justified in this case. Because he was not only an excellent, fine architect, he was the dean, of architects in Cleveland and the head of the Fine Arts Committee. And he also had the ability that many people lack of when you're defeated, just be quiet. And, things don't always, are not exactly to your liking. But Wally was a wonderful man, a wonderful architect, and our church is really, I hope that the young people in the church will remember who did a great deal of the planning and the work, because it's sort of handed to them now. Here's a church, And but to really build a church in one's lifetime is somewhat of an experience. Like building a house is an experience. You don't get everything the way you want it, and things don't always work out the way you want them. But of course, I'm still yelling. I couldn't be like Wally, but no. I take great comfort in our church. It's been a place of refuge for our family. And I can't imagine a life or even the lives of my children and grandchildren that will not be influenced by it.
Do you recall the reaction of the surrounding community to the new church? when it was in
Well,
operation?
I remember a very interesting story. Mr. Carl W. Schaefer was a very brilliant man, but very quiet and reserved and unassuming, a marvelous sense of humor. And the Roman Catholic powers that be were looking at that lot for a magnificent school. And he, there is such thing, I suppose, as craft. Well, anyway, he got in before them and bought the lot for the church. I believe in the artifacts. Am I right about this? You should know. I think we paid $10,000 for 5 acres, or 4 acres, or 3.5 acres. But it was a great blow to the other side. I think the people who live around us, I don't know that they've objected to the parking lot. Is there noise coming out of that church ever? I don't think so.
It used to be on Friday nights, possibly.
What?
Possibly on Friday nights in the past.
Well, that's all right, yeah. I think normal living, though, would cover it, wouldn't you? How about the daycare school that we have? Does that present any problems? I know it's coming up now for review. But, no, I think it's an excellent location, and we don't have a great Romanesque, or it isn't Salisbury Cathedral, but we took what we had and used it well, and I like it.
Want to get that? Okay.
You know about rum, do you?
Do I know about rum? No.
Well, it makes you see double and feel single. You didn't know that? Were you in the Army? No, you're too young to have been in the Army. Just think.
He's just 30 years old.
Air Force.
You know, did you realize that all the men my age, except the one that just called, who's 4 years younger, are dead?
Yes, well, that's what the tables say.
Huh? What?
That's what the tables say. Women outlive men by at least 10 years or better.
Oh, well, you'll live forever because you're in the proper generation. But, and also remember that 250,000 of my generation were killed in the South Pacific alone.
Mm-hmm.
Do people realize that?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Well,
I don't think so either.
I was alive during World War II.
What, dear?
I said I was alive during World War II. I remember when college mates went off to war. So you see, I'm not a newcomer either.
No.
I want to thank you for your hospitality. Grab my coat and run.
Are you going?
Well, my husband is not well, and I feel I'll rest alone probably long enough.
Would you like a glass of cider before you go?
No, thank you very
You
much.
would?
That's very kind of you.
Well,
I
I'm
appreciate
sorry,
it, and
I'm
I
going
love
out
being
tonight, and
Would you like to tell us something about your memory of memorable guest speakers in the church?
well, you mean at a church service?
Whatever occasion.
I remember very well Ashley Montague.
Oh, yes.
Because he was a charming speaker and he was saying such interesting things. And the government had just called on him uh, because they couldn't understand why our soldiers were dying in the prison camps at such a terrible rate, in the Japanese prison camps. And he found the Turks were not losing a fraction. And it's because they ate everything on site and they worked as a group. We did a very unfortunate thing during World War II. We'd take a man from Iowa, one from New Hampshire, one from New Orleans. In First World War, when I was a child, they went as a group. For instance, the people that I knew in Greene County, Ohio, came back. And you don't know that was such a support system all through that terrible World War I. And I can remember the day we are the county seat. We had this tremendous dinner at noon. Everyone brought something. And then you could hear them marching, I would say, half a mile from the railroad station, the Pennsylvania. We were on the main line of the Pennsylvania. And here, you know, you just felt that terrible surge of patriotism. I was 10, and I felt, oh, I've won the war. But more than that, I'm in love with Captain Darlington, who is the captain of the company from Xenia. And you know, those memories are marvelous. So, you know, as we get older, we don't live in the past, but memories, I think, give us strength and sustain us and give us great joy.
I think one has to remember how it used to be. Continuity is important.
Yes,
I think
right.
so.
That's right.
Tell me, do you notice any enormous changes in the church?
Yes.
The early church compared with now. I don't mean the fact that new people have come in. Naturally, that has to happen.
Well, people are more casual. You answer the bell. Pretend you're the butler. Say, Mrs. Metcalf is not home. Would you come back later? If it's a paper boy, sorry, she can't move.
Mrs. Metcalf suddenly has got a butler.
Nonsense. What is his name?
Bill Life. Life, I think. L-Y.
I see him in church.
Yeah.
How spell his last name?
I think it's L-Y-T-H.
L-Y-T-H, uh-huh.
I think so. I got it right down here. That lady sent me. L-Y-T-H. She wanted to know your name, Bill.
Big breaker.
Who was that?
That's Ann.
Hmm?
That's Ann. She was backing up. And she and yours.
Oh, she wants me to move my car?
No. She tried to move it.
She tried to move my car?
Where is her car?
She couldn't move my car.
And that's the one thing. I will not agree with the minister or the present congregation, but, you know, when you're a Unitarian, you can always dissent. And I think that when it destroys something, now, for instance, our choir gave this beautiful program. Now, the people in the choir are telling me they agree with me. And suddenly, that whole ambience was disturbed. We might as well have been in a YMCA hall or something like that. And I am, you know, I'm interested in the mystique of religion, certainly, historically and in other ways. And I like the freedom of our church, but I think there, by necessity, have to be some bounds to some things. And I would wish, and I would think we could, you know, all rise if people feel they want to make an unusual tribute to the choir. But I don't think in many sanctuaries people clap. And we are not an auditorium, we are a sanctuary. And also, I think some form of decorum is a good example for children. Now, you can laugh at all the Edwardian customs, but we knew on Sunday we were bathed and dressed very nicely. We decorously went to church school, and in the afternoon we could not roller skate, we could not ride bikes because it disturbed the Sabbath quiet. See, these were Sabbath people. And so people worked hard then. Maybe they'd worked almost till midnight on Saturday and gotten up and gone to church. Everyone went to church. And it gave them a day of real rest. No commotions. Family dinners, yes, but they were within bounds. Sometimes
Perhaps the church just reflects the changes in the outer society
oh,
today.
certainly. I think the pendulum is swinging back, though. I think people, when they get too
in 1605, and the second part in
the norm, they suddenly have a craving for safety and for having life have some pattern to it. Don't you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Even in our own lives, we get up, we have breakfast. Of course, you will we get you out at that early hour, Mr. Light? We will. And maybe a very inconsequential lunch and dinner. And one thing I liked about being in England so much, and our family had it too, was having tea in the afternoon, and that's what I would normally have for you. But since I'm going out, you know, at 6 o'clock, I can't do everything. And I'm very, very troubled about your car, because that's such a mean thing.
Well, I'm troubled about the time it's going to take.
That's right.
But she didn't, you know, she didn't
Well,
mean
I'm not talking about her.
No,
I'm
and
talking.
if she'd have just come in and said, "Good, I think you better move your car,"
Who was doing the driving?
Anne Murray.
I see.
Yeah. Well, I thank you, Maudwyne.
Well,
This
I
has been a
thank
pleasure.
you. I don't know how you've borne up under all this
Oh, no.
barrage.
So, it's very interesting, really, very interesting.
Well, I'll tell you, for instance, as I told you, my name is Munro, M-U-N-R-O. And I have in my attic dozens of rather didactic sermons. So you see, I think my ancestors way, way back were, maybe I'm related to Cotton Mather, but I don't think so.
I'm glad you got away from that.
Yes, yes. No, I think my folks in New England, I don't like to say this because it sounds snobbish, but I think the level of education and intelligence and seeking is probably higher in our church than other churches. Am I wrong?
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. The great thing to me about Unitarianism and the Unitarian Church is that when I walk through that door, I feel this freedom.
Yeah, yeah.
That I can believe what I believe
Yeah.
and not worry about what I don't believe.
Mm-hmm.
And feel concerned about certain religions that tell people that
Oh,
the God only listens to you because you are what you are.
oh yes.
That's-
Well,
things like that
yes.
Are bad.
The thing that worries me most in this country is not the racial problem, but the extremists both on the right and the left. it's quite marvelous for people to tell you exactly what God thinks and what God doesn't think, and it makes a very interesting country. And I am interested in the racial thing because, as I was telling my friend here, that my folks were quite noted abolitionists, and the Kentucky slave owners offered $20,000 for his father, dead or alive. So you see, they lived very dangerously.
Oh, yeah, I guess they did.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Can I use your ladies' room? I'm going to run now.
Oh, yes, yes.
And